Well, morning, everybody. As we go live, we have the charming Volker who's joined us again. I'm really looking forward to the discussion this morning, Volker. I don't want to go into a lot about myself, so why don't we kick off and understand where we're going to go with the trust factor, how to build a high trust culture in teams.
Yeah, I trust we have it all covered. Sorry. You probably saw that I couldn't resist on LinkedIn either.
Well, I think the chances that we're going to cover trust in this short period is unlikely. However, one of the things we want to explore is the trust equation, and part of the trust equation is the two parts, which is trustworthiness plus trusting. So the last part is fairly easy. You need to trust in someone to and give them your trust to create the trust equation, along with trustworthiness. And I think that's what we're going to talk about today, a little bit about the trustworthiness equation. Shall I sort of just start the conversation, or did you want to kick off with something that you had?
No, you're more than welcome to kick us off with the trust equation. I was just saying, I mean, to build trust, right? Even in half an hour to build trust is really, really difficult, right? Because trust builds over time. And as you know, we've been speaking about emotional intelligence a lot as well.
Yes.
And, it's about this empathy and building these relationships, right? It just takes time. But yeah, I'll let you kick off with trustworthiness.
Sure. The thing that you talked about there was empathy, and the three parts, and it's related to the two parts we'll cover a little bit. Let's cover the easy bits first, and those are credibility and reliability. And credibility is just, what is your experience? What have you done? What have you delivered? And that creates a sense that someone, when they're looking at you, when you're talking about your experience, when you're talking about maybe even your CV or talking about your previous roles, you can point to credible delivery. Then that is backed up with reliability. How often do you do it? Do you do it on time? Do you say what you're going to do, and do you do it? Are you someone who is accountable for what they say they're going to do? And accountability is very much about two aspects. That's responsibility. So you are responsible, and you take that responsibility very seriously. And then also, it's not just a case of delivering what you're responsible for, but taking ownership of how that result actually is thrown forward into the future and delivers value and creates engagement moving into the future, whatever it is that you've delivered. So it's having invested all the money, having invested all the time, having invested resources. The reliability is what are you now doing with that, because it's based on accountability. So let's talk about the other two parts. Let's talk about intimacy and self-orientation. We'll come towards self-orientation later. Intimacy, I think, is a really interesting word, because most people run off and start worrying about what you mean when you say, I want to be intimate to be trust.
Yeah.
Have you ever used
that's a bit dodgy, couldn't it?
Yes, and having occupied several senior roles and being a CEO myself, talking to people about, well, we need to get more intimate is not the way to go. So I thought it is the performance, it is the currency of a high performance culture to have trust. I mean, that is just simply, if you want high performance, you need to have trust. If you want to have trust, you need to have intimacy. And I was talking with a company at a food industry event yesterday, and the CEO there was quite clear that they have a culture whereby they are intimate with each other. And what does it mean? Well, intimacy is the emotional security or safety you feel when entrusting another person with something that is either personal information or your vulnerability. And this particular CEO was talking about how they had a relatively recent employee who had had a major life event. I won't go into details, but they immediately, as a company, stepped up and said, take time, you need to go do what you want to do. But it's that intimacy, the ability for her to share with them what this major life event was, to be vulnerable, knowing that she could trust her employee and the senior team to actually take on board that vulnerability and the concerns it was causing her, and to support her.
Yeah. It's,
This,
the
sorry,
the key word is psychological safety, right? Or the buzzword, I shall say, not keyword, right? Because
yes.
that's been used by a lot of people. But you're absolutely right. I mean, as you know, we discussed that. Brené Brown, right, wrote a great book and a great TED talk on vulnerability. She's done a lot of books, by the way. I read a few of hers recently, and it's being able in an environment to openly share what's on your mind. As you say, personal things, life events, positive or negative, without being afraid that people might go like, oh, I don't know, your dog died, you can't concentrate on work, you're rubbish, and people put you down. But instead going, oh, your dog died, I'm really sorry, how can I support you? We're all here for each other, right? And that's where the aspect of emotional intelligence comes in again, right? Empathy, understanding, flexibility. There's so many aspects of the EQ model that play into that. But it needs to come from the leadership, and the leadership needs to, if I say, it needs to trickle down from the top to be able to create that culture where people can openly share. And you don't find it in many cultures that it's really the case. And I was giving a presentation yesterday to a group of account managers and salespeople. And if I say, we got about halfway through the presentation, and it was on emotional intelligence. And one of them started opening up and going like, yeah, I'm going through some life changes at the moment, and then openly shared his story, and then someone else shared their story. And it became one of those sessions which went totally off rail from a, if I say from my presentation, but it wasn't about me, right? I could, once a sudden I created a space there for people to share. And that was so valuable for them. It was so good to see that they could do that they were trusting each other, right? With that piece of information. So yeah, intimacy is great when it happens in companies.
It is the language of successful high performance, as you say, and the trust being the language of high performance, or the outstanding aspect or value of high performance, is something that people need to embrace when individuals talk to you and they share things with you. Are you judgmental, or do you seek to understand why is this a concern for them? And that intimacy that allows you to not judge, but to seek to further understand, is a trait that goes through all successful cultures. And that is not that you allow people a huge amount of rope that they then sort of use almost against the company or against you, that latitude. It's the ability to say, well, tell me more about that. Why is that affecting you so seriously? What is it that makes you feel that this is really troubling you? And or whatever is the right way of putting the question to the individual incident. And when you seek to understand, the key part of that, it's a Stephen Covey thing, seek to understand. That whole thing changes the dynamic of trust, because people suddenly say this person is authentic and they genuinely want to understand me, and not to assume from their own life's experience that they understand me from projection and understand from me about me from casting their own shadow onto what is my life.
Yeah. It's active listening, right? It's which comes again. It's. I mean, they attribute it to emotional intelligence, but active listening is what Stephen Covey talked about, right? It's the same principle. It's listening to actually understand rather than listening to answer, right? And it's makes great leadership, makes good salespeople as well, right? I mean, as you know, do a lot of sales leadership coaching, and
Yes.
people sometimes go like, "Oh yeah, I want to answer this, I want to answer that." Don't focus on the answer. Focus on to actually understand the client properly or the prospect, to really, build that trust essentially, right? Because
Yes.
you're spending time with someone and you properly understand them. You can still download all your knowledge onto them, at a later stage, right? It's not important in the first instance, because we all know, right? If I just download information onto you in our first call, you might go like, that's a bit too much, right? He's talking at me, I don't want to deal with him, and then the rest of the equation becomes zero, basically.
Yeah.
The trust is out the window.
So that question that you've just asked, I think part of the answer is really, for me, was eye-opening to myself. When I first started many years ago, I'm afraid I'm too old to be a recent learner. And that, although I learn all the time, that question, I remember a coach saying to me, are you pretending to listen to somebody while you formulate your next challenge and injection into the conversation? Or are you genuinely listening to somebody so you can understand them? And that whole principle that we're talking about, that you've just injected into the conversation of, you can always look at someone and their eyes are almost dead, or they say they're listening, but actually they're not being intimate with you. They're not being vulnerable. They're not being authentic. All they're doing is thinking about how they can either challenge your understanding without understanding, or challenge you with the next piece of information that is, please understand me. I need to tell you this. And that is from a sales perspective, as well as from an executive perspective, people seem to forget that people look at individuals and they immediately read them as, you're interested, or you just want to tell me your messaging. You're not interested in listening to me.
And it becomes, I think, more and more difficult, because with online meetings, people are distracted, right? So they might do the emails, they might be on ChatGPT, they might, I don't know, be on WhatsApp, Facebook, Instagram, wherever, whilst being in meetings. And so it's a challenge, right? I think you notice in some meetings, or when I give presentations, and the camera is off, and you just know you're just talking to a wall. There's no engagement, there's nothing coming back, because people are not listening.
Yes.
And if you have that with a salesperson or a leader who you really want to, obviously you want to be intimate with, right? And
Yes.
you don't get anything back, then that's difficult, because then ultimately the psychological safety isn't there, because you don't trust that person, right?
Yeah.
You might tell someone something and you go like, does it actually resonate with the person? Did he or she listen?
Well, absolutely. And I think you beautifully brought us to the thing that divides the whole trustworthiness, and that is self-orientation. And before we go on further, I've got to say to people listening in, and hopefully there are a few, this whole aspect, every client we work with, every CEO I've ever worked with, every CXO I've ever worked with,
Yeah.
eventually you'll come down to this equation and say, this is part of our problem. And most people do not say we have a credibility or a reliability problem. They do say we have an intimacy problem. You know, are we vulnerable? Are we authentic? And those things are very much things that you can address. But it's all destroyed in an instant. Destroyed in an instant when people do everything from a self-orientation perspective. And that you can imagine giving someone, you know, proving your reliability, proving that it's comes with enormous credibility and what you're doing is correct, and establishing vulnerability and telling stories, which is something else we haven't covered, about oneself and about one's EQ and about one's learning and about how one made mistakes and about, so you really build the intimacy. And then you blow it all by saying, well, thanks very much, I'm off to do what I was going to do in the first place.
Yeah.
Or saying, well, I hope you've all got that. Now we need to do it my way. Or, and that's the absolute classic is, you know, the phrase, buy a dog and then stand by the gate barking yourself. And
I never heard that one before.
no, absolute classic. You know, why buy a dog if you're going to bark yourself? And you find a lot of self-orientated people will agree that they have credibility, reliability, and intimacy, agree that others have credibility, and reliability, and intimacy. And then they'll start doing things like, well, let me tell you how to do your job.
Yeah, because it becomes all about them, right? And it's the moment, I would argue, the moment it becomes all about you, then how can you create intimacy with someone else? You can't really. It's no real intimacy there, right? And we've you know, I'm thinking of two different scenarios actually in my head. So one is where you know, in startups and scale-ups, you often find that that's the CEO and the founder thinks, oh, I'm the best person in sales, right?
Mm-hmm.
I've sold 1 or 2 deals when I first launched the company, so I'm good in sales. I'm a natural salesperson, which often isn't the case, let's face it. And you know, they then hire a salesperson to try to tell the salesperson how to do their job. You're like, no, you hire a salesperson so because that person knows how to do the job, and the salesperson then knows when to bring you in. So you know, it's about letting go. And the same is true for any other function, of course, right? From particularly in technical founders. But it's not making it about you and making it because the other thought I have is, you know, in terms of good leadership, you know, what I always did when I was still on the corporate side is I always said, you know, if everyone improves, you know, the ship rises with the tide, right? And you know, it's not about me. You know, I might be the captain of the ship, but by myself, you know, if I rise or not, it's the whole ship needs to rise. And it's, you know, this I just don't like selfishness, right? You're either in it together and you do it together or you don't, right? And then go and do something selfish somewhere. that's all right. But you don't create trust. That's the thing. If you literally use other people for your own gain, and that's not trustworthiness, right?
No, it is absolutely what you're talking about, and in terms of people being so self-orientated to damage the ship from rising, is this inability to understand that others contribute through their expertise and knowledge, and they might do things differently to you. The question is not what you're doing to get there, or even how you, more importantly, it's not how you do it. It's about whether the result is measurable and whether what you're doing is repeatable. And many companies who go through growth, which is a main focus for us, suppress people's passion and potential by telling people, well, the way I do things is the right way. And it's remarkable. It doesn't mean that you can't train and you can't help people, What it does mean is that you have to be a coach within your business to allow people to show you how they are going to demonstrate their credibility and reliability to you through delivering for the job. And
Yeah.
one of the things that we use that really helps us as a tool, for example, is I know you use we use with you the EQ tools and that sort of stuff. We also use something called an organometric, not a psychometric, which is called the GC index.
Yeah.
And that's just another wonderful tool where you put everybody on a platform, everybody can look at everybody else, and you suddenly start to understand it's not about your psychology, it's not about how you turn up to work. It's about areas where you have passion. It's about areas where you have energy, and how can you best use that to have impact in the business. And once people start realizing that your credibility, reliability, and intimacy actually is what your energy for impact really is, and by not making it self-orientated, you immediately remove the denominator or
Yeah.
reduce it massively. All of a sudden the business just picks up, and you get significant growth, and because people suddenly feel free to deliver.
Yeah, and to be honest, as we've been talking, I have a maths background. I'm an engineer by trade, right? I'm looking at the equation, and what I really like is a cumulative bit on the top, right? So there's the no, I forgot the word. So the top bit anyway of the equation, right? So
Credibility, reliability, and intimacy.
yeah, no, I'm thinking of the word, not the denominator, the
Numerator.
yeah, numerator. There we go. Thank you. See, talking about being an engineer, and I forgot the basics. it's it's accumulative, right? The more credibility, the more reliability, the more intimacy you have, this all adds up, right? And the lower the denominator, so the self-orientation, the higher the overall trustworthiness. So it's really nice to think, right? If you look at a scale, right? Let's say self-orientation, the closer it is to zero, the less it is about yourself, and the higher the credibility, reliability, and intimacy, and as it adds up, the higher the trustworthiness. So it's a beautiful way of putting it, which is obviously the obvious. I'm stating the obvious of the equation, but it's just yeah, it's just a great equation, which I haven't seen in years, to be honest.
Yes.
When you mentioned it, I've seen it a few years ago, but I haven't seen it used a lot recently. But it's such a beautiful way of looking at it.
Well, we use it as a cultural probe when we first go into clients.
Yeah.
And you can always tell an organization that is struggling because the attitude and the culture is one of, let me tell you about me. Let me tell you how important I am. Let me tell you what I do is more important than anybody else. Let me tell you how I've saved the business. Let me tell you how without me, this business would have gone to the wall. Let me tell you about, without me, how we wouldn't have had any growth in the business. These are, frankly, toxic cultures where, and you find it in many large companies, because of the greasy pole, people feel they need to promote themselves all of the time. And I remember coaching, it was a woman actually, not that makes any difference, but she was lovely and charming and an amazing person who'd done really well. She was under 40, and she was a senior exec in this well-known consumer brand. And we just talked through this. We just talked through this self-orientation, and she talked to me about the need to self-promote within the business and the need to, constantly be self-orientated, because that's just the culture of the business. So I talked her through and asked her, well, what does she think her employees, the people who work for her, think of this?
Yeah.
And she said, well, clearly they don't like it. It was a really interesting moment for her, and she suddenly dialed down her self-orientation and dialed up the intimacy that she had with her team, and then started to build out that vulnerability and authenticity with her fellow exco. Well, she wasn't on the exco at the time, and all of a sudden, within 6 months, she'd at the end of the coaching process, she made it onto the exco, and she's a fantastic person who I've stayed in touch with, and we talk about stuff now. And it just goes to show that it's her that was really blocking herself. And we often talk about this, the ability for people to prevent their own progress, and identifying that, and identifying and supporting her to become a more trustworthy individual was the most elevating for her, and the most releasing. It literally cut chains from her career, and she was able to speed off to a real massive promotion within 12 months of starting the whole process.
Yeah, because it's often not about, if I say, self-promotion, right? It's about visibility, right? And visibility is a lot different to self-promotion. It's a fine line, right? Coming back to the salesperson, right? The salesperson that shouts a lot about how great they are, and that's the salesperson that listens first and then shouts about the relevant things. It's finding that fine balance. It's if I say, as I always say, right, it's not easy on the top, right?
No.
There's a lot of things you need to consider, and you don't want to come across as it being all about you, because most people on the top are, they are career oriented. It is about them, right? They want to perform. But I was just thinking about that this morning. I don't know why, but if you want to go fast, go alone, and if you want to go big, go as a team or something like that, right?
Yes.
Something, however the saying goes. I want to go far, I think it is, go with the right team. And I think that's in there as well, right? Because if you're just by yourself, you trust yourself, right? Scraps the equation. But if you want to build an organization, as you say, if you want to build this high performance organization, you want to have everyone on the boat. This is a great equation to look at and go like, actually, it's not so much about me. And
yes.
it's, intimacy is important, reliability, credibility. This all comes together, and it all adds up.
Yes. I think that phrase that you use is one that I really relate to when we coach, and when we facilitate, and when we help organizations to evolve their cultures, and help teams to become more effective, is a rising tide rises all boats. And self-orientation is just an anchor, or even a hole in the bottom of the boat.
Oh, I like it, an anchor. I like the anchor analogy. Yeah.
And that it's once people really buy into the fact that trustworthiness is about showing how the skills of those around you, the credibility and reliability of those who are working in your team or for you, is what makes it happen. That culture is just allows you. It's about like turns your boat into a piece of balsa wood in terms of floating credibility. You just rise up. You have less and less draft, less and less deep seated challenge to the culture of the business, and more we float, and we really drive value first, and that accountability, that being vulnerable about what is working and what isn't, stories about what works and what doesn't, the ability to give credibility to others and give a sense of achievement to others is what really allows most companies to thrive. If you talk to senior business leaders who've been very successful, many of them will tell you the greatest successes is watching those who they have promoted, provided escalators to. In fact, it reminds me of one particular senior person who never wanted to go into the executive.
Yeah.
And he always said to me, you know, I don't want my personal life exposed to that level of public company scrutiny. I don't want to be in that place. I have young children, and, you know, gave me lots of good reasons why he didn't want that. But he was more than willing to promote others, and more than willing to put others forward who wanted that, who had that aspiration. And he quite happily saw people get promoted past him, get to positions in public companies that he may have wanted to ascribe to, but his own vulnerability said, I don't want to have that level of public exposure to myself. And it's very interesting how his lack of self-orientation allowed him to promote others and really push Cream to the top of this very well. They were a FTSE 100 company. They've since been bought and merged, but you know, fascinating stuff. Fascinating.
Yeah, we're out of time, Michael. Unfortunately, you know, we can.
Well,
I know we could go on, but I really enjoyed that, and I hope, you know, there are a couple of comments. You know, others enjoyed it as well, and brings value. And if nothing else, a bit of self-reflection to some of those leaders out there, right? To think, actually,
yes.
You know, what can I change in my organization? You know, and it doesn't need to be the whole organization; it can just be your business unit. And go like,
Yes.
how can I change things a little bit to increase this trustworthiness?
Yes.
And how can I change it with my clients as well, from a sales perspective, right?
Yes.
How do I get clients to trust me more, and therefore increase my sales, and maybe decrease the sales cycles, which at the moment are going up because of the uncertainty. So, yeah, there's lots there. Thank you,
Volker. You mentioned a couple of things. You mentioned some TED Talks and an individual and a book. And we will drop those as links. I will also talk about, we'll drop a link to the GC index. And if you want to try it, we'll put it as, you can just write to us or write to me, and we'll do a gift link, which means it costs you nothing. You effectively get some coaching and then some experience of what, you know, trustworthiness and having impact through authenticity really means. And if you wanted to do something on the EQ stuff, I know you've got, we could drop that link in there as well. So thanks everybody for listening. Thank you, Volker, for coming and sharing the stage with us today. And we look forward to seeing everybody next time.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, bye-bye, everybody.